Don't settle for bad socks. Get comfort and grip at an affordable price with Pure Grip Socks Pro. Choose from 18 different colors at puregripsocks.com.
When you think of speed boots, you probably don't think of New Balance, but maybe you should. Ladies and gentlemen, say hello to the New Balance Furon V7 Pro, the refresh to the previous V7, which I argued was New Balance's best speed boot to date, and the V7 Plus effectively builds on everything that was so good about the previous model and makes very subtle changes to arguably make it even better. The design is unique, the upper is thin while still being remarkably comfortable, they're as light as just about anything, and the traction is super aggressive, all for a retail price of $215, making them way less expensive than the most popular speed boot options. What's not to like? And don't get me wrong, I'm not here to sell you on a pair of New Balance Furons. There are definitely some things about these that I myself am not in love with, but I do think it is almost impossible to argue that these aren't the best bang for your buck speed boots currently on the market, at least when you're talking about the top end level. Which is why in this video, I want to discuss the good, the bad, what's different from the previous V7 that it replaces, as well as how they fit and feel on feet. So if you're interested in learning more, please stick around. And if you are interested in a pair for yourself, you can pick them up below their normal retail price in either regular or wide fit via the first link down below by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes. And as always, if you guys enjoyed these brutally honest reviews, don't forget to drop a like on the video and make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you haven't already so you don't miss out on my reviews of all the latest football boots of 2024. So first things first, new versus old, the first thing that's really gonna jump out at you is the difference in appearance, where I think part of the main issue with the entire previous generation of New Balance football boots was the way that they look. Nobody liked New Balance written across the side, and not many people were a fan of this giant New Balance logo here on the forefoot. And the new model really simplifies the New Balance branding, just giving you that classic N that looks quite modern and I think is positioned quite nicely through the lacing system on the lateral side. And then you just have a small New Balance logo there on the medial side of the heel. So in terms of the graphics package, I think this new design just makes the overall silhouette look a lot more sleek. Aside from aesthetics, the main change that you're gonna find between V7 and V7 Plus have to do with the upper, where I would argue, again, they've made some nice improvements with the V7 Plus. However, those improvements are quite small. So as I said, with the Tequila Plus model as well, if you have a pair of V7 Pros and they don't need to be replaced, it's probably not worth running out and upgrading to the V7 Plus because the experience won't necessarily feel like a gigantic upgrade. So like I mentioned, by far the biggest change is the Hypo Knit upper, which is still a knit-based material. You can see the pattern of the knit itself is a little bit different in that it's textured in some spots and then kind of left completely smooth with that polyurethane top layer. None of that texture, I would argue, really makes for any real variation in terms of touch. The finish is left mostly slick, so it's not going to provide any additional grip on the ball. And all of these orange graphics that almost look like texture aren't actually texture at all. It's just there for visuals. Where you will find a big difference, however, but one that ultimately doesn't have a huge impact on performance, is what's happening here across the top of the foot. Obviously, the Furon 7th generation has the unique design of this slightly more extreme take on an off-centered lacing system where they're pushed very much to the outside of the foot, kind of having this piece wrap across the top of your foot and giving you this really clean striking surface while still maintaining a super high quality fit and a comfortable one as well. Often when you have these off-centered lacing systems, it can lead to complications in terms of how the upper is able to grab your foot, but I think New Balance have actually nailed the shaping in regards to the V7 as well as the V7 Plus. What I like about the Plus model in particular is they've actually made this material really significantly ribbed, which kind of reminds me a little bit of the striking element from the now discontinued for several years Nike Phantom Venom. It's maybe not quite to the same extreme as that boot in terms of how far it raises off the football boot, but the actual ribs themselves are very, very strong and pushed, or I should say compressed, really firmly. So to the touch, they're actually quite hard. And when it comes to actually grabbing the ball, while it's not necessarily a sticky texture, because of how rough it is, it does legitimately grab the ball and almost give the sense of being a striking element without any additional bulk. What's also really unique about this particular element is New Balance have sneakily kind of reworked the construction of this entire upper. So while you're still getting what is admittedly a very similar, super thin, soft, sock-like hypo knit upper, that hypo knit material, you can see the seam kind of here at the back, spans across the entire lateral side of the foot, goes all the way through the forefoot and toe box area. Then you can very faintly see this seam right here. On the previous model, this seam didn't exist. It was basically one material all the way around. Then you had a separate piece for this top kind of, I don't want to call it a lace cover, but this section of the upper across the top of the foot. On this model, it's actually a thinner, slightly more structured material transitioning kind of on a hard seam right here. And then from here to the heel is that firmer material, which of course does wrap across the top of the foot as well. Now, normally, I don't love it when they add a seam in the forefoot of the upper. However, on this particular model, they've hidden it so well, you don't feel it whatsoever. And the benefit of actually doing this is this type of mesh material through the midfoot is a little bit more structured than the rest of the hypo knit. So again, it's very subtle. If you are comparing this to the previous generation V7, I would argue that the V7 Plus, because of the added structure from this material, does feel that little bit more secure and that little bit more responsive. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the speed mesh material from the X18.1 as well as the X19.1, if not a little bit thinner and softer than both of those football boots, with again, kind of a Phantom Venom-esque striking element across the top of the foot, which is only able to be there because of this really unique off-centered lacing system. What's also really cool about the Furon design is that it does have a one-piece upper construction in that there is no physical standalone tongue. Underneath this giant lace cover is elasticated knit material. So when you slide your foot in, you might be surprised to learn that there is basically a sock across the top of your foot that you do have to pull into place and kind of just adjust to make sure that it's sitting perfectly flat on your foot, making for really a contained kind of custom fit even before you tie the laces tight. And then with this lacing system being pushed so much to the outside, it gives you that tightness without feeling that kind of lace pressure across the top of your foot. Which brings us to the rear of the boot, where again, they have made some subtle changes coming from the previous generation. You have this elasticated knit material that kind of extends into the smock collar, although you'll notice the structured area on the side actually comes up a lot higher on the new model than it did on the previous one, which creates a deeper fit in the heel that I think makes for better lockdown as well as better overall comfort, which is always an area that I prioritize when it comes to a pair of football boots, because if the heel doesn't fit right and feel comfortable, almost everything else doesn't matter. You do have an internal plastic heel counter, giving you plenty of structure back there, and the heel lining material is pretty well the same. It's the soft microfiber lining with plenty of extra padding. Again, the lockdown through the heel, nothing to complain about there. And then the insole, fully removable. You can see it is pretty well the same as the previous model, giving you that kind of soft silicone Infinigrip liner. It's not quite as sticky as the implementation that we've seen from Puma, but it is a little bit grippy on your socks nonetheless. But the insole itself is the same kind of cheap black foam material, super, super light, but certainly nothing special as far as high-end boots go. Which brings us to the base, a direct carryover from the previous model. Nothing has changed here at all. The sole plate itself is still a super lightweight plastic with a little bit of that kind of spring back effect, but in general, I would say on the more flexible side of things as far as speed boots go. And then the stud pattern, this of course being their FG layout, is admittedly very Mercurial-esque. Maybe not so much in terms of what they offer right now, but if we're talking about the days of the Superfly 5 and the Vapor 11, this is more or less a copy of that, although I use the word copy very lightly because I think it's very difficult to do anything in the world of football boots that doesn't look or feel somewhat similar to something else that we've had in the past. Nonetheless, these bladed chevron studs are super aggressive in terms of the amount of bite that they provide, and also on the longer side as far as what you're going to find from most FG stud patterns. So if you happen to play on hard ground or certainly on artificial grass, I don't necessarily think this is the best layout because of the length of the studs, but on a well-kept firm ground surface, or maybe even on soft ground, the traction that you you get from this is pretty much as aggressive as anything out there. And then there's the weight, where again, I love comparing the new model to the old one, and given the design similarities, you probably shouldn't expect that much of a difference, but of course, the scale never lies, both in the same size 9.5 US. We'll start off with the outgoing V7 Pro. They weigh in at 6.2 ounces, the equivalent of 177 grams. Change the scale back to ounces, and we'll throw on the V7 Plus, and you can see that they weigh in at 6.3 ounces, the equivalent of 178 grams. So as you can see, a weight difference of quite literally 1 gram, which I would say is basically down to manufacturing tolerances, but perhaps more importantly, whether it's the V7 Pro or the V7 Plus Pro, these are the lightest football boots you can buy aside from the $300 Crazy Fast Plus in the speed category. On feet, you're gonna notice two main differences coming from the original V7 Pro, both of which I think are a nice improvement. The first of which is very subtle, and that is the slightly different material that you have across the top of the foot, as well as the instep of the foot, which is a little bit thinner and a little bit more structured, just making them feel slightly more secure. That I would say is more noticeable when making quick cuts and changes of direction. The second thing that I think is a huge improvement is in relation to the heel, where they have actually changed the structure a little bit, and in turn, it ends up fitting a little bit deeper. It changes where the pressure is on your heel in such a way that I would argue is a nice improvement in terms of overall comfort. The lockdown is great, the comfort is great, and the feel of the boot in general is very thin, sock-like, and natural. It wraps your foot very closely, as you can see. No extra space inside this boot whatsoever, and it really has that nice blend of fitting very snug without feeling like it's squeezing your feet in an uncomfortable way. What's also cool about these is from a width perspective, while I'm wearing the regular width variation right here, which as I always say with New Balance boots is probably the best option for the vast majority. If you do have really wide feet and still want to get into a tight fitting speed boot, they do make a wide fit variation, which is going to increase the width and the volume of the football boot, making it more accommodating for a wider foot type. So having that option, particularly in the speed category, really makes this a super unique option. And then as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. So if you are looking to get a pair for yourself, I would strongly recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. But as far as super lightweight football boots go, this is pretty much as comfortable as it gets. So in conclusion, it's not a secret anymore. New Balance makes some seriously good football boots at a price tag that is significantly lower than the usual suspects. If you are on the market for a pair of speed boots in 2024, particularly if you're looking for something with that super lightweight feel, you would be silly not to consider the V7 Plus Pro.